Good morning and welcome to Media Monitor on SABC News Channel 404. I'm Sakina Kamwendo, your host for the next hour, where we'll be unpacking stories that hogged the headlines this past week. And here's what we'll be exploring today. We pay tribute to the late Hugh Masekela by looking at his musical journey, his legacy and his influence on aspiring artists. The Justice Department released the terms of reference for the state of capture inquiry, and understanding these terms of reference, we have a legal expert to explain further the importance of these terms, so stay tuned for more on that. And we'll also delve into the commissions or inquiries that took place this past week, the Eskom inquiry, Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings and the SASA hearings, and we also take a look at the key role players in these commissions. And lastly, we'll cast the spotlight on the nomination of a South African-produced animation film at this year's upcoming Oscar Awards. And we are, of course, pleased to be joined by veteran radio host and media personality Nothemba Madumo. We'll also have Morakabe Raksasiakwa, who is a poet. He's the founder and director of the Wright Associates and the South African Literary Awards, and the convener of the African Century International African Writers Conference and the Hugh Masekela Annual Lecture. Good morning and welcome, Nothemba and Rax.
Thank you,
Good morning.
Sakina.
And later we'll be joined by political analyst Professor Tiniko Maluleke, Financial Mail Deputy Editor Sikonati Manchasha, and constitutional law expert Mfesani Siboto. First, let's start by taking a look at what's making headlines in the papers this morning. So the Sunday Times today is leading with a story about Mineral Resources Minister Mosebenzi Zwane, who is accused, number one, for his role in the sophisticated and elaborate scheme that allegedly siphoned off 220 million rand that was meant to benefit poor farmers to fund the Gupta's luxurious lifestyle. Now, Sunday Times further reveals that Atul, Rajesh and Ajay Gupta will be accused number 2, 3 and 4 respectively, and all will be charged with money laundering in the next few weeks in what will become the first state capture case to be prosecuted. City Press this morning, they're also running with the story about the Gupta family members who are now being pursued in earnest by the Hawks, with at least 7 cases said to have been at an advanced stage of investigation. The case includes Atul's offer of ministerial positions to former Deputy Minister of Finance SABC Jonas and former MP Feki Mentor, as well as multi-billion rand contracts at state-owned enterprises including Eskom and Transnet. The Sunday Independent leads with ANC's newly appointed top 6, who have claimed in court papers that KwaZulu-Natal party leader, who is challenging the outcome of the party's 54th elective conference, is not a member of the organization. The ANC's Deputy Secretary General, Jesse Duarte, who filed an answering affidavit on behalf of the top 6, claims that Vincent Myeni, the Msunduzi Sub-Region Ward 32 branch chairperson of KZN's Moses Mabhida region, was not a delegate at the party's conference, despite evidence including Myeni's accreditation card and photos showing that he was a delegate at the conference. The Sunday Tribune today in KZN, they leading with CM Lee's murder case, which has escalated from the Durban North Police Station to the Provincial Detective Task Team for further investigation. And finally, the Weekend Argus, they're running with a story about Cape Town's water crisis. As day 0 nears, stricter penalties will be put in place to deter water wasters, with Water and Sanitation Minister Nomvula Mokonyane warning that repeat transgressors will face criminal charges. So that's what you can look forward to in the newspapers this morning. But now we shift gear to the digital segment, where we look at the passing of the legendary jazz musician and activist Hugh Masekela. And of course, this reverberated across the world, and many took to social media to share their sympathies, and some even sharing selfies on social media with the late Hugh. Pabalo, thanks so much for coming through this morning. Please take us through it.
Okay, so Sakina, obviously Hugh Masekela has been trending for the past couple of days ever since the news of his passing, but I just want to show you, in the past 24 hours alone, these are all the different regions across the world where Hugh Masekela has been searched. And you can see here on the map, it says that he searched mostly in Johannesburg, Pretoria and KZN. However, you also get other countries like the United Kingdom, you get countries like Kenya and Uganda. And I mean, this is just indicative of how Hugh Masekela's music transcended across so many different places, so many different cultures, and globally as well.
And what are they saying about him?
In terms of what they're saying about him, we have a tweet that came through from a rapper called Casper Nyovest. He's a very young rapper. He's 27 years old. He's very influential, and I mean, he tweeted about Hugh Masekela just after he passed away, saying that he actually had a chance to share a stage with him. And I mean, I think this is also indicative of the fact that Hugh Masekela, his music transcended not only to people of his age, but also to young people as young as Casper Nyovest. He's collaborated with the likes of Black Coffee. He's also collaborated with the likes of Thandiswa Mazwai as well. So it just shows you just how much influence his music had. I mean, here's the tweet here. He says he once got a chance to share a stage with him. However, when he did his fill-up F&B, he was unable to perform because he had other priorities. So like I was saying, it just shows you just how much he touched the lives of not only old people of his generation, but to the younger generation as well.
And of course, what are they saying abroad, you know, the messages from abroad, and who is speaking about it?
Okay, so you have a lot of international artists who are like the Apollo, for example. Here, the Apollo Theater in the United States, they had like a whole showcase where they were talking about him, and they sent out this message on Twitter saying that in memory of jazz legend Hugh Masekela, 1939 to 2018. And this was retweeted over 2,000 times, and it was also liked over 1,000 times. So it also gives you an example of just how much impact he had, not only in the States, but then on social media as well, just seeing how much the image was retweeted.
And that's very interesting, and of course we saw tons of selfies. Of course, moments like these lend themselves to people showing that, hey, I'm one of those who met the legend.
And I mean, just outside of Twitter as well, we have other social media platforms like on Instagram. I mean, you can see in the past couple of days, ever since the news of his passing, posts on Instagram on their own, 9,289 posts. So it kind of shows you, and I mean, look at young people. You have Proverb there, you have Anelem daughter there. So it just kind of shows you how he resonated to so many people.
And of course, then the Markfish challenge, we're not going to talk about that. Yeah?
The Markfish challenge. So like any other person, Markfish made an error. He posted an image of Bra Sipho Hot Sticks Mabuze instead of posting a picture of Hugh Masekela. And then social media went crazy. So everyone was posting pictures of whoever looked like another person. So there were pictures like, for example, somebody posted a picture of Markfish with Black Coffee, and then other people posted, like this one, for example, here, it was on Instagram. It says hashtag Markfish challenge, and then they're putting the finance minister as Black Coffee. And then you have other pictures that are coming through as well from other users like Fikile Mbalula and Sholozi in their early youth. You can clearly see, I mean, it's a no-brainer, you can see. And then we have other pictures coming through. This is from DJ Fresh. He's saying, so proud of Ed Cristiano. You really have come a long way. So Sakina, it just goes to show you, in the midst of all the sadness that was overcoming us just after the news of his death, I mean, South Africans took to social media and expressed their humor about everything.
Absolutely. Babalo, thank you so much. And as some would say, South Africans sometimes really do not deserve the internet. Well, we continue to pay tribute to Hugh Masekela after this.
Pump up your energy, keeping you in action through sports updates while resting at home. This is what's happening in your world of sports every weekend.
In the second half, Kolisi and Jaco Kriel combined well, and Kolisi scored his second try. He was also named man of the match.
Confusion from the West defenders gifted Batosi with a close-range goal.
Osina, you touch the penalty! It's 1-0! Kaito City!
In the 10th round,
He pinned a visibly fatigued McGregor on the ropes and hammered the Irishman before the referee stepped in to stop the bout.
He's a tough competitor.
He's a lot more experienced, especially in the layer.
Keep it locked on Sports Live every Saturday and Sunday at 20:30.
And of course, much talk this week about the passing of Hugh Masekela. And on Friday, a memorial service for the late jazz legend and anti-apartheid activist Hugh Masekela was held at the Sankopano Hall in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. Now, the historic township is where Masekela began his musical career. The 78-year-old jazz icon lost his battle against prostate cancer on Tuesday morning. The Masekela family has announced that Bra Hugh, as he was affectionately known, would have a private funeral. However, fans would be able to pay tribute to the musical icon at a series of memorial services over the next few days. And through his fame, Bra Hugh addressed a number of issues like the importance of indigenous languages, storytelling, and of course music. His position on hair weaves and on black women in particular was probably the most provocative and one that caused quite a stir. And while others in the media fraternity appreciated his direct approach, others deemed him to be somewhat condescending.
It is warm and melodic. It is the sound of the flugelhorn, and one that has become synonymous with the name Hugh Masekela.
I'd like to introduce myself formally. My name is Hugh Masekela.
The internationally acclaimed musician, composer and lyricist did more for spreading the gospel of black urban South African music than most, with the possible exception of Miriam Makeba. Bra Hugh Masekela was born in Witbank, township of Kwakuqa, in 1939. By age 14, he was attending St. Peter's, a popular Johannesburg school run by the respected cleric Trevor Huddleston. It was the apartheid chaplain's benevolence that saw the youngsters getting instruments. Masekela got a trumpet from none other than the great American musician Louis Armstrong. By age 20, he was part of the recording of the country's first modern jazz album by black musicians.
I've been a musician since I could talk and think, you know. That's the only thing I've ever wanted to do. So I'm a sponge for it. And having come from the South African people and everything that I am, I think if I was from Germany, I probably would be a great beer brewer. You know, if I was from Sweden, I'd be like a cross-country skier. But I come from a people who are extremely talented. Even our revolution, you know, here was all full of music. And I grew up just absorbing what they are about. So I think because at heart, when it comes to music, I'm still a child. I remain completely mesmerized by music, especially the music of South Africa.
And of course, the late Hugh Masekela. And Nothemba and Rax, you know, watching that, one can't help but think, on the one hand, yes, it is a sad moment that he has passed. But on the other hand, how can you not celebrate a life that is so richly, you know, lived? And Hugh has just left so much for us. But Rax, let me start with you. What kind of person was Hugh Masekela?
Well, you know, other than what we all know as a musician, I think Hugh was a deeply intellectual person. And that's why from the Right Associates, the company that I'm associated with, we came with the Hugh Masekela annual lecture. The reason for doing that was to expose and reflect on this huge side of Hugh that many people, you know, do not know. Hugh is an author of quite a few books, including fiction. And it reminds me when we took him out to Uganda, where we took the Hugh Masekela annual lecture in 2015. He was such an amazing guy, you know. Whenever people met him, Hugh will make sure that he leaves a lasting impression on people in terms of educating people. I remember the person who was going to deliver the lecture, another great Ugandan jazz musician, Isaiah Katuma. With his band, they played before the lecture took place, and the backing musicians, especially the ladies, thought they were impressing Hugh, you know, with the waves, and Hugh would have none of that.
And that caused quite a stir.
They had to wear dukes, you know, throughout. But it's quite a nice show. Even the great actress from Kenya, what's her name from Kenya? Lupo, I think, yeah, was there. And Hugh was making jokes, but very deep in his you know, discussions. Yeah.
Very deep, but where do we draw that line? You know, in that regard, also with regard to his relationship with the media in general, Nothemba.
You know, Hugh embraced his Africanness totally, and I think this was a lot in his music, and obviously in his messaging as well, and even this issue of hair. It was just him trying to reinforce his message that, look, love who you are as an African, and he's continuously, I guess it's even come out a lot in this week, where clips of him talking about the fact that, look, especially worried about the youth, that they're adopting this Western culture at the expense of who they are, and who they are is the best. You know, that there is, because everyone wants to be something African, and here we are trying to denounce that. But I mean, for instance, there's the annual concert in the Eastern Cape, Buyelekaya thing, which I was emceeing once, where he was performing, and so backstage there were all these ladies who wanted to come take pictures with him, and you know, also they also had the human hair, or rather the extensions and what have you, and of course, as usual, he was like, listen, you can keep your hair, but there is no way I am going to promote that with you taking a picture with he doesn't. You can have your hair, but don't you dare come and take a picture with him. He's not going to promote that, you know.
But doesn't that go contrary to the women's emancipation message, whereby women should have the choice to choose what they want for themselves, and if it is their choice to wear a weave, then so be it?
Well, it's a free world, it's a free country, but I really, I met one with Hugh from the heritage perspective. Not only was it about the hair, but it was also about the language. You know, your tongue, because with the advent of colonialism, we were literally, our tongues were literally cut off. We couldn't speak in our own languages. We spoke, you know, in the master's voice, as it were. And I'm quite, you know, glad to myself to have been associated with Hugh. We have the International African Writers Conference that the OAU declared in 1991 as the International African Writers Day. And Hugh gladly became one of the patrons with Chinua Achebe, Nadine Gordimer, Skief, Eugene Skief, Wangui Wagoro, and a number of other writers. But he came in there because the aim of this conference, which we have every year, is to make sure that we keep to our culture, we advance our heritage. Especially language.
And language is the foundation of the heritage.
It's a carrier, yes, indeed, yeah.
And of course, how do we keep his legacy alive? I mean, the one thing about Hugh is that he was obviously very secure in who he was as a person, and that shows through all the collaborations and how he freely shared, you know, what he knew, his wisdom and all that he was with others. But how do we keep his legacy alive now that he's gone, Notem?
I think it's more about living up to what he was trying to say in his music, and even when he just talked, and even with the, you know, as it is right now, he's got his foundation, which is to promote the culture and heritage of Africans, and not just South Africans, as diverse as we are. But he was very much in love with the continent, and as you know, he's traveled the continent, and everywhere he went, that was his messaging. In other words, let's not lose who we are. I think following that would probably be the best way of keeping his legacy alive.
And of course, his social conscience that was always there and very keen for all to see. Sure. How do we go about, again, making sure that we stay on that path?
Well, the greatest thing about Hugh is he made his voice heard, very much so, very loud, through his music, but through his interactions. As his Notemba says here, he started the foundation, the Hugh Masekela Foundation, or the House of Masekela. And I think with a whole lot of us in our own small ways, for instance, the Hugh Masekela annual lecture, which we really want to grow to be quite big, not only here in the country but elsewhere. And his other involvements, he was involved in so many things, feeding the poor, you know, quite a lot of things that people actually don't talk about. But when you sit with Hugh, you gather all of this. So I think even when he's no longer with us, as he's no longer with us now, we are all the wiser for having had him in our midst.
And I think you rightly say there is still so much to learn, so much that has been taken for granted. You know, throughout the week, people listening to his music were saying, for the first time, I'm really hearing the message in those songs. Yeah. So, Notemba, will you be doing anything on your show later?
Yes, definitely. Thank you for the opportunity. Sakina, tonight between 9 and 12 on my radio show on Metro FM, which is called the Urban Jazz Experience. I'm so happy that the station has allowed me to dedicate the whole 3 hours to Hugh Masekela. And in there we'll be playing his music and music of other people he's collaborated with. And I'm also going to be talking to his manager, who's been a manager and friend who's managing him for years, and we'll get to know about him outside of what we know in South Africa. And I also have some artists, local and international artists, who are also paying tribute to him on the show. So the listeners as well will partake in also letting us know how the question that you asked as to how do they think we can keep his legacy going.
And of course, Rax, with regard to the memorial lectures, when can we look forward to any time soon?
Yes, you know, just before Hugh passed on, in fact, before he became quite ill, he had already, you know, as he normally does every year, already anointed the person who is going to give the lecture, which we'll announce at a later stage, because now there are mornings and things like that. But it's going to be quite a big one. We must say also that Brahu's shows or his legacy can be seen. I mean, from now at the Hugh Masekela Heritage Park, Park View. Until
and I'm sure Notemba will also be available to help spread that message. But Notemba Madumo and Raxiakwa, thanks so much for coming through this morning. And as you heard, more of that on Metro FM later tonight.
Our stories.
How do I begin?
Our lives. When all seems to fail, we will raise our voices a bit louder for our justice.
I went into absolute shock. My whole body was shaky. I couldn't hold a phone, but there he was. I couldn't believe the nonchalance that they were still in the area 2 weeks later.
And in times when the justice system is not able to help us with our individual battles,
I'm willing to do anything. What are you doing? Nothing. Feeling sorry for yourself? No, it's not an option.
These are our stories on Cutting Edge Channel 404.
An exciting opportunity and an absolute must for those with the spirit of adventure is a Kruger Park night game drive.
The railway station itself is already a sight to behold and offers gracious colonial-style buildings and serves as the departure and arrival point for all train journeys.
I wanted to dress with my best color. Being awarded to do the Serpentine Pavilion is the highest commission in my career. And I wanted just to come and show me with my best clothes, and that is blue.
Catch Trends Travel every Sunday from 12 to 1 for all the global travel and leisure trends.
Welcome back and thanks for tuning in to Media Monitor. Now, one of the highlights of the news this week was the release of the terms of reference by the Department of Justice for the much anticipated Commission of Inquiry into State Capture to be headed by Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. Now, the Commission has been tasked with investigating whether President Zuma or any other senior state officials violated the law in awarding tenders not only to the Gupta family but any other family, individual and or corporate entity. Now, the terms of reference for the Commission refer to allegations of corruption involving President Zuma, cabinet ministers, the Gupta family, and to all corruption in government. The Commission has been given 180 days from the commencement of proceedings to submit its report to Zuma. And we are now joined by constitutional law lecturer from Wits University, Mfesane Seboto, to shed some light into these terms of reference. Good morning and thanks so so much for coming through.
Thank you so much for having me.
So first and foremost, let's start with the term of 180 days. Is that sufficient?
Well, it's relative, is it not? Because you would recall that the terms of reference are directed to be guided by the state capture report, as well as the judgment of the North Gauteng High Court. As to whether that is sufficient enough time for Deputy Chief Justice Zondo, who's heading the commission, whether that's enough or not is relative to who he wants to summons, or rather who he wants to call into giving evidence, how promptly he receives the documents is requiring from the various stakeholders, and evidence from other people that will be leading or rather giving evidence to the commission. So it's always relative on those terms. As a rule of thumb, though, I would imagine 180 days should be sufficient.
Professor Chiniko Maluleke is also with us. Thanks for your time this morning as well, Prof. But those 180 days, the Chief Justice already, sounding some unease regarding that. But given the scope of the terms of reference that we do now have, do you think that more time will be needed?
Probably. None of the commissions that we have had so far, the famous ones, have been able to finish within the time that has been given to them initially. Not the Marikana Commission, not the Heha Commission, not the Armsdale Commission. All of them have had to apply for more time, and they were granted more time. So, in all probability, I think this commission is probably going to need more time than this. But I think it's good to set a time frame, because that also put a bit of pressure on all the players to say that we have a limited time. But I have never heard of a commission which has asked for more time and not given.
And then, of course, the resource factor, and that is very important, because it seems as though there will be some very extensive forensic work that will be done with regard to getting to the bottom of what seems to be a treasure trove almost of malfeasance that needs to be uncovered.
Well, absolutely. So you'd recall that the former public protector, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, bemoaned that very fact, that not enough resources were provided to her in terms of fulfilling the research and findings, coming up with findings in terms of the state of capture report. But with that being said, I do not see, given that now this is a commission rather than work of the public protector, we should have an issue in terms of financing. But then again, I suppose we'll have to wait and see as to what comes out of that whole process and whether in fact they do have enough resources.
Professor Maluleke, the former public protector also spoke about what she terms scope creep. And there's been quite a bit of discussion around the terms of reference and, how tight or trite they should be and what should and should not be allowed in.
The most ridiculous scope creep suggestion I had was that the commission must go back to 1994. And others even saying, why 1994, before 1994? That would
go
have
to
been
1652,
while
you at it.
That would have been tremendous scope creep. And I think that there is a level at which the scope is so broad that nothing gets achieved or nothing can be achieved that is meaningful. I like the current terms of reference. I know that some people feel that there has been a broadening of scope, especially since the SOEs, more SOEs, rather all SOEs are within the purview of the terms of reference. But I really don't see that as an extensive broadening of scope, because there is a sense in which you can't know beforehand which SOE is likely to be culpable and which one is not. So I really think it's not too far from what the public protector has suggested when I look at the terms of reference now.
Mvesane, do you agree? Is there anything that you would like maybe to tighten up on with regard to those terms of reference?
No, absolutely. I mean, I must agree with Prof. Maluleke on this one, because in as much as you want to limit the scope of the terms of reference so that you direct it towards a particular goal, you don't want to hamstring the commission as well. So incidentally, it could well be that an SOE which does not appear in the state of capture report might have well have been involved in the state capture. So you don't want to limit the scope in terms of reviewing those state-owned enterprises as well. And secondly, might be concerned, and this has come up in the media quite a lot, that why not investigate all the all the elements of state capture, including what now they term the white monopoly capital. Let's remember that this commission is set up pursuant to the Public Protector's report with specifics as to what it is that the president needs to deal with in terms of the commission. If it's so be it that people want an extensive commission on other white monopoly capital concepts of state capture, there's nothing that prevents the president from doing that. Secondly, there's nothing that stops any citizen from lodging a complaint with the Public Protector for that to be done. We are directed, in fact, the proclamation itself is clear on this, that it is pursuant to the Public Protector's report and the North Gauteng High Court decision that we have this commission. Necessarily, it follows, therefore, that it must be limited in scope in terms of, i.e., following the guidelines of the state capture report and the judgment of the North Gauteng.
Additionally, I mean, you know, nothing says that the law enforcement agencies must wait for a commission to do their job. If there is any criminal activity out there, I mean, they don't set up a commission to investigate me if I break the law. They do the job that they have to do. So I think that sometimes we expect commissions of inquiry to do also what the law enforcement agencies must do, what the police must do. I think the police and the law enforcement agencies must do their job meantime.
Because it's going to be very interesting if we take, for example, the developments around the Estina, the dairy farm in Vrede, and the developments on that front. And you take, for example, the SABC and the parliamentary inquiry that took place with regard to the SABC. So how does that impact then the work that the commission then has to do?
You asking me or him?
Well, I was asking you, Prof, but Mfisane, you may go for that.
It shouldn't affect it at all, because there's nothing in law that prevents these two, well, the commission and the investigation by the NPA and the Hawks running in parallel. The one does not substitute the other, and the one is not dependent on the other. As a matter of fact, you could well, I would be surprised if the Public Protector at the time, Advocate Thuli Madonsela, foresaw the change in politics, which is now, in my mind, fast-tracked the investigations into the what you refer to as Estina and so on.
But is the commission now obligated to go back and look at those two examples that I've cited, for example, again? Or can they assume that those have been dealt with and just move forward on them?
Well, the commission is directed in terms of the proclamation, in terms of what they should do, and that's what they need to report back to the president. As to whether now, well, the fact that now there is separate prosecutions in terms of the NPA does not preclude the commission from fulfilling the specifics that were set out in the proclamation. In my mind, the commission should still sit and do those investigations fully, because we might well get to a point where the NPA decides there's nothing to pursue here. What does that mean now for the terms of reference in terms of what the president had asked for? So in my mind, it should still continue as is.
I think Sakina, you know, one of the unspoken scandals of our times is why the NPA and the Asset Forfeiture Unit and the police and the Hawks have done nothing so far. They don't need a commission of inquiry to do their job. They have a job to do wherever there's wrongdoing or allegations or suspicion thereof. And it is amazing how little has been done until January 2018 by those agencies.
Well, after the break, we'll look at a roundup of the commissions and the other inquiries, so do stay tuned for that.
We're talking news, business and sporting updates both continentally and abroad. South Africa is in its first economic recession since 2009.
Currency has appreciated quite a lot, especially for this year. And it has benefited from a number of things, not so much to do with what was happening here at home.
The Islamic State-linked news agency Amaq claims the latest attack was launched because of Australia's backing in the US fight against the group.
Constad is one of the dozens of women who have accused Cosby of sexual assault, but hers is the only case recent enough to be subjected to criminal prosecution.
Stay tuned to News Today at 3 p.m. from Monday to Friday on SABC News.
Well, this week saw the commissions and inquiries hogging headlines for all the wrong reasons. And starting with Life Esidimeni arbitration hearings where patients were transferred to ill-equipped facilities. We had former Gauteng Health MEC Qedani Mahlangu who warned of disastrous implications of moving psychiatric patients from Life Esidimeni despite her denial that she never heard any of the foreboding predictions. Another testimony that shook South Africans this week was that of Masekela and the newly resigned Chief Financial Officer of Eskom, Arnoj Singh, during the Eskom inquiry into mismanagement of state funds at the state power utility. Both executives says, "I did not know, it wasn't me," and that became a song that was sung by many other senior government officials like Batabile Dlamini, Qedani Mahlangu, and of course Lynn Brown, claiming ignorance of their governance duties to deny responsibility when things go wrong and their actions come under public scrutiny. For more on this, here's a short insert.
I'm not aware. I don't know. Not that I recall, no, sir. I would not know, sir.
Would it be correct that it would have been Mr. Zwane?
I will take it on your word, sir.
I don't recall that. I don't recall it. I don't know, sir. I don't know.
I cannot carry a personal
Just yes or no, ma'am?
I served in a public office and I assume the political responsibility, and I cannot carry personal blame because I was not working for my personal self. It cannot be correct that all the time you. It can't be. That's a collective decision. Indeed, that's how government works.
It's not, you don't have the power to run SASA, let me put it that way. Do you agree to that?
Where did I run SASA?
I'm asking you, do you have the power to run SASA?
Where did I run SASA?
Minister, would you answer the question, please? For the third time, do you say that you have the power to run SASA?
I have not run SASA.
And you agree that you don't have the power to run SASA?
I did not run SASA. From start to finish, I never ran SASA.
So, just a little recap of all the denials that we were privy to this week. But joining us for this segment of the discussion, we also have Sikonati Manchasha, who is the Financial Mail Deputy Editor. Sikonati, thanks for coming through this morning.
You're welcome. Thanks for the invite.
So, accountability, at least we would think, is the overriding factor in these commissions of inquiry. And it's shocking that no one wants to take responsibility for what happened on their watch.
They don't even know what those terms mean, accountability and responsibility. That doesn't exist in their vocabulary. And you just need a judge sitting there waving a 15-year jail sentence to make people remember everything. And that's exactly what's missing. That's what's been missing in South Africa the past 8 years. People have been stealing and grabbing and doing all sorts of things with impunity. Many of those people that appeared there are guilty of treason, which is undermining the institutions of the state. In the example of Eskom, particularly so. And none of them remembers because there's absolutely no consequences. They will then cruise off in their luxury vehicles paid for by stolen taxpayers' money. And when you introduced this segment, you said mismanagement of funds. No, let's be frank here. It's the theft, brazen theft of the monies of the people of South Africa, entrusted to those people that today cannot remember, don't know, can't recall, were not informed.
And you've been quite firm in calling it treason and treasonous behavior. And this week I saw some authorities also using the dreaded T word. And of course that has major implications if people are indeed found guilty.
Absolutely, and it goes right to the top. It starts with Jacob Zuma. He's been implicated on the record in those hearings as having initiated the biggest destruction of the management team of Eskom. Now, that is treasonous behavior by the head of state, whose job is exactly to do the opposite. And it goes all the way. Eskom today has lost about, in the last 5 years alone, about 150 billion rand. That money was not mismanaged, it was stolen. And these people that appeared on TV there played the biggest role in it, together with their bosses.
And just hopping back a bit to the terms of reference of the commission into state of capture, the President, Jacob Zuma, including himself in those terms of reference, did that come as a surprise?
Well, not at all, because remember again, like I'd made the point earlier on, that the commission and its terms of reference must be guided by the state capture report. Who was the main player in the state capture report was the president himself. So he himself could not get away with not including himself, because if you read the state of capture report properly, you understand that the president is the main player in all of this. I mean, of course, we've got the Gupta family, but who's the head of state, or rather, who's the head player from the political perspective? It's the president himself. It therefore came as no surprise to me that he had to include himself there.
But did he absolutely have to, Professor Maluleke?
Well,
could he have somehow, found a way to keep himself out of the limelight?
He couldn't have, because the public protector, one of the moves that are quite unprecedented, has been the recommendation that the chairperson of that commission should not be chosen by him. So already he had no power in choosing the Deputy Chief Justice as the chairperson of the commission, and one does not know what else. He did not have an individual singular influence on, and I think that if he had left himself out of this inquiry, then no, it would not have been credible at all, because that's the point of this commission of inquiry. Just to go back to what Sikonat was saying earlier, either the people who are appearing before Parliament and before commissions of inquiry, such as the SCDMeni, either they are practicing for the real court case, and therefore they are taking us for a ride, or they are simply so disdainful of South Africa and South Africans. The arrogance with which they approach those commissions, the way they treat the members of parliament. I mean, I don't know what words to use. There is so much sense of arrogance. It's not so much what they say, it's also how they say it. It's not merely that they don't know, but how they tell you that they don't know, and you ought to know that they don't know. It is just, for me, amazing, the disdain.
But given how we've witnessed that and the lack of accountability, is it then fair that people should still remain in positions, those who are still in positions of authority?
Sakina, the truth of the matter is that we are having these commissions because law enforcement agencies failed. This is Parliament acting out of desperation. In spite of the mountains of evidence there's been not been a single arrest. It should start right at the top. What gave you the power to instruct Zola Tsotsi to dismiss or suspend the 4 executives of Eskom? What gave you the power going to Lynn Brown? Who authorized the transfer of at least 1.6 billion rand to Mackenzie and to Trillion? Musebenzi Zwane, how did 10 million rands land in Atul Gupta's account under your watch? Yes, there's that thing called collective responsibility, but that only applies when they sing and dance at their conferences. The buck has to stop with somebody.
And then there's also this thing called due process. And we saw Masekela Koko saying that he will not resign. And given that there was an internal inquiry, an internal investigation that found him not guilty, is he within his rights to resist? Prof?
Well, I mean, if you want to look at this thing in a very narrow and very technist kind of way, you could say he is within his right. But who is he fooling? Who is he fooling? I mean, are South Africans so unintelligent that they don't see through what he is trying to do and what he has done at Eskom? Haven't there been enough evidence, not just from the media, but from the Gupta email leaks, from all of these things? I mean, I don't know that I mean, I think what he is doing is that he is preparing for the real trial.
Sakina, I'll tell you this, the Prof is making a slight mistake here. The media did not manufacture this evidence.
No.
We receive it from the people who investigated Masekela Koko, and no less than 4 investigations recommended that he be charged criminally. All sorts of charges, including corruption and all of that. But in terms of the Labour Relations Act, yes, he's within his right, but he's no ordinary employee. That applies to the lower ranking employees in an organization. He is an executive trusted who should be in a position of trust, and that trust has been grossly abused. And the president, definitely the minister in that department, can say, I can no longer work with you as they have now. Please, off you go. He is in a position of trust. He's not an employee.
And just, Fazana, there was a very interesting moment early in the week at an ANC press conference where journalists asked Ace Magashule, the now Secretary General of the ANC, about his involvement in the Estina project, because he was the Premier of the Free State at the time, signing off finally on the monies that went into that project. So, and his answer was very interesting. He said, my son works for the Guptas. That is common knowledge. But what's wrong with that answer?
Well, there's everything wrong with the answer. It's the same answer the president gave us in Parliament when he was confronted on Ututuzan. It's not enough to say, well, it so happens, because this is blatant conflict of interest. And linking my response to what we were discussing earlier on is that it's not enough. There's this over-fascination with what the law provides and so on. Politics is not just the law. What about the public confidence? So there must not only be proper exercise of power, but there must be perception of such as well from the public in terms of public confidence. So for me, it's not enough to say, wow, he just so happens to work with the Guptas. The public confidence is compromised at that very point, and it's not enough to just say, wow, it just so happens. Blatant conflict of interest.
Well, I guess it's not just about what we know, but more importantly about what we do not know that is likely to come to light that will be of greater importance. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time this morning, and no doubt we'll be hearing more, we'll be talking more about all of these developments around state capture. Now, Revolting Rhymes is the animation film that has taken South Africa by storm this past week, as it was nominated for Best Animated Short Film at the Oscars. And Revolting Rhymes was produced in collaboration with the UK's Magic Light Pictures and will go up against Dear Basketball, Garden Party, Lou and Negative Space. And though scripted and voiced in London, most of the animation and some of the set building took place right here at Triggerfish's Cape Town studio. Media Monitor would like to congratulate this massive nod and wish the team behind the production all the best. The Oscars will take place on the 4th of March 2018 in Los Angeles. So we'll take a look at that insert and play out with that. But thank you so much for watching our show, Media Monitor, this Sunday. And we hope that we will see you again, same time, same place next week. From me and the rest of the team, good day and stay blessed.
What great big ears you have, Grandma.
Fairy stories.
What great big eyes you have, Grandma. But Grandma, what a lovely, great big furry coat you have on.
You think you know these stories? You don't.
Flowers?
Once upon a time. Suddenly, one awful day. Bang, bang, bang.
Yes! Red? What happened?
Patient.